Perspective. Despite people being surrounded by perspective, they still don't seem to understand it. But don't worry, because I have you covered. Hello my friends, Rob here from Button Press Graphics, back with another Inkscape tutorial and a little bit of a technical exercise mixed in for good measure. So without further ado, let's get started. Perspective. Perspective is something that, if you can see, you are surrounded by it. You are seeing everything, the entire world, all the objects that are around you from your own perspective. And yet it is difficult for people to incorporate that very same perspective into their artwork. So today I'm going to give you a rough explanation of what perspective is and how you can use it in your design with this interesting little project right here. Now I'm going to be going off a 1-point perspective today, but there are such a thing as 2-point perspective and even 3-point perspective. Now if you want to check out 3-point perspective, that is a separate video when I go over the 3D box tool, which uses the 3-point perspective mode. So if you want to check that out, you can click the box up in the top right corner right now. But for today, we are going to go with the 1-point perspective, so let's get started. Now, as you can see, we have this single picture right here. Now, this is just a rod with a coloured end that I have personally coloured in, as you can see. And the body of it as well has been coloured a different colour right here. Now the reason I've chosen this picture in particular is because it has a slightly skewed circle on the end. Now of course we already know that this is a perfect circle. However, if we was to come closer to it and I was to create a circle coming from the center of it, as you can see, it doesn't match up at all. Now this isn't because of it being wrong, this is because of your perspective, the way you're seeing it. So as you can see right here underneath, I have broken this rod up into 3 parts. We have the left circle. So if we were looking directly at it from a left angle, all we would be able to see is the circle on the end, because all of this would be behind the circle. Alternatively, if we was to look at the rod side on, you would no longer be able to see this left circle or even the right. You would just see something that looks like this. And then you would see the right circle if you were looking at it from this end, as you can see in this picture. So that is pretty much how it works at a very basic level. Now I suggest giving it a try yourself. Pick up an object that is close to you right now. Ideally make it something long, like a pen or a pencil. And while you look at one end, you will notice it's much larger than the other. So if you was to rotate the left side of this rod closer towards you, you would have this left part showing, but you would still not be able to see the right. Alternatively, going in the opposite direction would show you the right end, but you would not be able to see the left. And you would have this taper going here as well, where one side would be a lot smaller than the other. Now, those who are eagle-eyed might have also noticed these 2 little circles here, one there and one there. These are what is referred to as the vanishing point. That means if you was to continue the line coming from here all the way back, at a certain point they would vanish. So if I was to turn on the guides that I created earlier by coming up to the ruler and giving that a click, the line comes parallel with the top and the bottom and it will vanish at this point where the cross section happens. Now they call it the vanishing point because beyond that point, from your perspective, you cannot see anything else. Once you have got comfortable with using 1-point perspective, I suggest using 2-point perspective, which is slightly different. So if you want me to cover the 2-point perspective as well, please by all means let me know in the comment section down below. So let's start with the design. Now of course our design is going to have a vanishing point in the exact center of the canvas. Now if we come down to this button right here, which is your document properties, and giving that a click, you can see that I have my width and my height set at 2000. Now as long as these two numbers are exactly the same, you will have a perfect square canvas, and I suggest doing exactly that because it will help you with today's project. Once you have all the settings that you need, you can close out of it. Next we're going to use our squares and rectangles tool right here. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that snapping is turned on. This is going to allow me to snap to the center. With it snapping onto the center, I'm going to hold Shift and Control and I'm going to draw a square. It is kind of pale because of my previous settings, so I am going to go down here and put that up to 100. I do not want it to be opaque in any way, but I also do not need it to have a stroke. I just need the fill. So I'm going to come down to this bottom left corner of the swatches. I'm going to select the black and then I'm going to hold Shift and select the red X to take away the stroke. With that done, I am going to go path, object to path, and now we have our very first square. Next I'm going to take this square with my select tool and I'm going to just move it up to the top left corner, and with it still selected I'm going to come to edit and I'm going to go down to clones, create tiled clones. Now I have already got a full video covering the create tiled clones, so if you'd like to check that out you can click the box in the top right corner and go and check it out for yourself. But for now all we're going to be using is the Shift tab right here. As you can see, my previous settings are still enabled. Now in case you are wondering, we are going to be using 3 rows and 3 columns. If yours differs from mine, then please by all means select 3 rows and 3 columns. And as for the rest of the settings, if there is any previous settings still saved, you can reset by clicking this button right here. What we're looking for is to Shift X right here for per column, and we want to shift that at around 25%. Well, I could say anything between 10 and 25% will be great, but 25% normally works rather well. So I'm going to put 25%, hit enter, and then I'm going to come to the per row and Shift Y, and I'm going to enter 25 here as well. And they are the only settings we're going to use on this occasion. With that done, I'm going to come down to the create button, hit create, and now we have our 9 squares all equally spaced out between each other, just like so. And with that done, we can now close out of that menu as well. And lastly, we can take the box that we initially selected and we can just get rid of it. We have all the boxes that we need now, which means 9 boxes all equally spaced. So with that done, I'm going to hold Control and press A, and this is going to select all of them. Then with them all selected, you can right click and select Group, or alternatively you can hold Control and press G, and that will group all 9 of the squares together. And now we can open our Align and Distribute menu so we can make sure to get all of these squares completely central. So in order to do that, we're going to come down to this button right here, which says Align and Distribute. Give that a click, and then with page selected, we can select this button and this one, and that will get it completely central. Finally, what I want to do next is I want to select another rectangle, and I'm going to create a background. So in order to do that, I'm just going to draw a square over the entire canvas, going to change the color as well so we can differentiate between them, and I'm going to come to my select tool and then drop this to the bottom with this button. Now that is at the very back behind all of the squares. Hello my friends, it's Future Rob here. While editing this video, I have just realized that I made a mistake. There's really no point in grouping the 9 squares together when instead you can just use path and union. That would save you the trouble of ungrouping all 9 squares to then use path union. So I apologize for my mistake, just worth mentioning before you continue with the tutorial. Now let's get back to the video. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to hold shift and select all 9 of the squares, and I'm going to join them all together by going to path union. This is going to make them all one object. With that done, I am going to duplicate them, so you can right click and duplicate. Alternatively, you can Control and D, that will also duplicate them. And with the duplicate, I am going to hold shift and select the back shape, and then I'm going to go path and difference. Now what that has done is cut out all of the 9 squares out of the shape behind, as you can see if I do this. Now that is just temporary, that is for the end step. So now we have that shape, I am going to simply slide this out of the way, and we can come back to that in a little while. Now do you remember when I said about the vanishing point? For this design, I'm going to make sure that the vanishing point is dead center. So that is the center square, and it is dead center of that square. And from that square, I am going to start creating lines that will show the perspective. Let me show you exactly what I mean. We're going to use the pen tool, and as you can see, I will snap into the center, but we're not going to go from the center. If I was to come from this shape right here at this top right corner of this center square, and then come through the center down to the opposite side on this bottom square here, you will get a line that looks like this. Now of course, once you have selected that line, it will have the extra bit here we don't need, so we can just right click, and that has given us a line going across. Now what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to change the color so you can see these black lines a lot better, and you can see what I am doing. Using my select tool, I've selected all the boxes, and I am just going to change that color to something light so it's easier to see the black line right here. And now we're going to do the same again. We're going to do it from the opposite corner coming across. So next I'm going to do this line again, but this time I'm going to come from this corner to this one. And you will see that when I do, and again right click, and as I do, you will see that the snapping point in the center of the center square is exactly where these lines cross. That is the vanishing point right here. So all straight lines should connect right here. Now if I was just to take this top square on its own, as you can see, it's like we're seeing the top side on the inside of the entire image going backwards. And these two areas here on either side are the sides of this one box. So you can give the illusion of it being 3D and pushing towards. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one of the images that I did when I was testing this out. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to show you exactly what I mean. So take a look at this design. Now, if I was to ignore these shapes here, these squares, and have it just as is at the moment, with these squares being black, and then turn the entire object around, this would be the vanishing point. From this perspective, you can see that it reduces in size as it gets further away. So we're following the laws of perspective. And we can still see the 9 squares. But if we was to look at this exact same shape from front on, and we were looking this direction, this is the kind of effect that we would see. Now again, the center, you can see the vanishing point right here, and with the square above and below, you can see the sides and the top going back, and on this one you can see the bottom going back, and I have put a gradient on each so you can see clearly where the further back it gets, the darker it becomes. And I will leave that there as well so you can see as I'm creating it, you can see what we're working towards. Now when it comes to these corner squares right here, these ones, as you can tell, if you was looking directly into it and it was hollow, you would only be able to see the top and the side. You would not be able to see the bottom or the left side from where you are. Whereas with the center, you would be able to see all 4 sides because you're looking directly into the center. Again, using my pen tool, we're going to go from one corner to the opposite corner, one corner to the opposite corner, and then when it comes to these side ones, we're just going to go from one corner to the opposite corner on each opposite end, and again, so you get more of this star pattern. But these are the principles that you will go by when using a vanishing point and perspective. Anything that you draw, unless it is a vertical or horizontal line, every other line will have an angle that faces towards this vanishing point. So you could draw whatever shape you want, and it will always come from that shape to this vanishing point, unless it is a vertical line like the sides of these boxes, or a horizontal line like the tops or the bottom like this. So I hope I've done a good job explaining how the vanishing point works and how that helps with the perspective. Now the last step I'm going to do with these lines is I'm going to select them all. So in this case, I'm just going to use my select tool to select a bounding box around everything. Now, of course, that's all of the boxes and the lines with them. And then I'm going to come to my shape builder tool, which can be found right here. And you will have something that looks like this. Now, before anything else, we do not need these shapes that are in between. So I'm going to hold Shift and you will see that it turns pink. When it turns pink, give that a click and that will get rid of them. And then we are just going to go around the outside squares and we're going to select each shape so it's individually its own shape, like so. And for this shape in the center, we are going to join 3 shapes at the top, these 3 at the side, these 3 at the bottom, and these 3 at the other side. Now, in order to do that, I am just going to click on this shape and hold on the left click and drag across until they're all selected at the top, and then release. And again, I'm going to do the same on the right and the same at the bottom and then the same on the left. And now we have our 4 triangles that make up the center square. When you have it looking like mine is right now, you can go to the green tick right here, give that a tick, and there we go. We now have all of our shapes. Now, in order to differentiate between all the different shapes, I am going to add a stroke. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to select black while holding shift. And there we go. We now can see which shape is which. Now, like I said, with this design right here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use gradients. Now, the corners are going to be a radial gradient, and the top, right, bottom and left boxes are going to be linear gradients, along with the center. That is also going to be a linear gradient. Now, the colors on what you choose for this are completely your choice, but I'm just going to use black and white so I can show you in exactly the same way that I did with the previous one. So I'm going to open up my fill and stroke menu, but if you haven't got yours open already, you can find it right here. So I'm going to start with the center. I'm going to select this shape. So now with that selected, I'm going to go to my fill, which is this tab right here, and I'm going to select linear gradient, this one right here. And you should get something that looks a little bit like this. Now, of course, I'm going to change this color to white, and I'm going to change the faded part to black by selecting it there. And then I'm going to turn this alpha bar up so it's full, so it is no longer transparent. And with that done, I can now grab the end, bring that to the center, and grab this node and bring that to the top. And it is as simple as that. We have now added the gradient. I'm not going to do anything else with it at all. Next, I'm going to do it for all three of these. But of course, I'm going to have it going from the center to the outer edge for each one. Now, there is a shortcut in doing this. If you don't want to have to reset the colors every single time, you can come up to this button right here that says gradient, give that a select, and as you can see right now we have this one, that is what it is currently set to, and we have this one which is what I have just set on the previous shape. So I'm going to give that one a click, and as you can see, that's added the gradient for me. I can close out of it, and because we have the darker edge on the opposite side, I can just switch it to the inner like that. And for this vertical one, I'm just going to need to do that manually because it is horizontal at the moment. And there we go. We now have our center shape completely done. I'm just going to follow the exact same principle when it comes to this shape right here in the center, and that one, and that one, and that one. And then the rest, I am going to use a radial gradient, including this shape right here, and this one, and these as well. And again, I'm just going to make sure I'm in the center, and I'm going to have it grading very, very simply and not do anything else to it. Now let's move on to the sides. And this time I'm going to add a radial gradient. Now this one is going to be slightly different, but we can still use exactly the same colors. Now using this one right here, as you can see, the center of this gradient is perfectly black going out to the white. Now we're going to make sure that this center point is the closest to this vanishing point as we can possibly get it. So I'm going to move this little node all the way down until it snaps to this point. Now in order to get the vanishing point to grade it out very gradually, what I'm going to do is take this point, bring it down and snap it to this corner, and I'm going to pull this one as far up as it will go. Now if it helps, you can always hold Control to make that little gradient go exactly the way you want it. Now you could of course add a linear gradient to this and have the gradient coming from here to this point. It is personally up to you. I just think that this radial gradient looks far better. But again, this is personal preference on which one you would like to use when it comes to the top, the right, the bottom, or the left squares. Now I'm going to use the same method with this one, but I'm going to do it in reverse. And there you go, we now have our second shape done. I'm just going to rush through this next little bit. I'm going to do the right box, the bottom, and the left, and then I will catch up with you once I've done. And there you go, my friends. Now we have the top, the bottom, the right, and the left all done. Finally, we're just going to do a radial gradient in exactly the same way, but coming from this point outwards on all four of these squares at the corners of the design. So we're going to go with this one. Again, we're going to add a radial gradient, select the gradient menu, and then select it like so. And then I'm going to bring the darkest point as close as we can possibly go to the center, this point right here. And again, I'm going to make sure that I can have it the entire width of this square. So we're going to pull that away from this center point here to each of the corners, and you will get the perfect gradient like so. And again, going to do this shape in exactly the same way, and always making sure that I go from the center as the darkest area, no matter which shape I'm working in. This is always going to be the darker area, and as we're getting further and further to the front, then it becomes lighter and lighter. So I'm going to do the same again now on these last three squares, and I'll catch up with you at the end. And there you go. Finally, that is it. We have all of our squares completely graded out, and as you can see, it gives a really cool effect. But there is just one more step. Remember the border that we created earlier? Let's get that back again and bring it over. Now, of course, using snapping, it's going to snap straight back into place. And I'm going to add a gradient onto this as well. Now, before I tried a gradient where it was slightly lighter in the center, and I think that gives a really cool effect. So that's the one I'm going to do again. So with this selected, I'm going to use a radial gradient. And as you can see, we have a color in the center, but not on the outside because it's fully transparent on the outside. Now what I want to do is I'm going to have two different colors. Firstly, I'm going to have this color right here, like a baby boy blue. And I'm going to turn the alpha bar all the way up as well. And then I'm going to have a darker blue as that color right there. And now we have our colors as we wanted, but I want the light blue to be on the inside. So I'm just going to come to this button, give it a switch, and there we go. We now have this kind of effect. Now, I don't know about you, I find that very cool to look at. Even if you ask AI, you can get some images that look a little bit like this, but it is always going to be better when you do it yourself. Spend a bit of time on it and tell me what you think. And of course, if there's something that you think I've missed, by all means, let me know in the comment section down below. I read and reply to every single one. Give this video a like if it helped you, and give it a dislike if it didn't. And of course, thank you for watching. Did you know that you can become a member of the Button Press Graphics YouTube channel? Well, now you do. You will get a lot of added benefits and you will directly support the channel, enabling me to make much better content in the future. Also, you can send in your artwork into the Creative Corner. This is a regular section where I will showcase your work in a future video. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell and I will see you next time.